If you have at some point mained or considered maining or currently main, if you play a lot of sword characters, right, that aren't Pyra and Mythra, odds are at some point you've probably heard some nerd say something like, why don't you just play Aegis? They're basically your character, but better. And I've seen a couple players be annoyed after hearing this, and I get it. If you believe in your character, it's not fun to have people say they suck and you should drop them or something, but it's like, at the end of the day, who cares, right? It's just a game. If you want to play Aegis, do it. If you don't, right? Like, you can get upset, or you could just as easily disagree with this hypothetical person and say like, well, the reason I play Lucina over Aegis is she's better at she can do like. So Pyra Mythra, aka the Aegis, aka the story with training wheels, came out in March 2021, and since then they have always been in the top 10 characters in terms of usage in tournaments. Regardless of if you think they're overrated, I know that's kind of a rising belief, they're there. You gotta know this matchup because everybody knows how to play them. I don't really think that this is an issue. I mean, having variety is fun, but if you like playing Aegis, who am I to judge, right? Like, what am I gonna say? Stop playing the character you enjoy the most? No, right? Still, in this video, I want to look into what happened exactly that made sorties fall off, how Aegis shut down the who was the best sortie debate, and find out if it's really these two that caused some sword characters to drop in usage, if it was that along with some other factors, you know, or if they flat out had nothing to do with it and they're essentially just being framed for something they didn't do. I don't play this character, but I've had this game for over 10 minutes, so I should be able to give you some good Pyra Mythra footage for background. Let's get into it. I like the gold and silver alt. So again, the last thing I want is for this video to come off as like a hit piece on Aegis mains or something like that, right? I promise that's not it, but you know what, let's just go, alright? Let's talk about Pyra Mythra. Before they came out, there was an interesting debate on who was the best sortie in Smash Ultimate. By sortie, I of course mean characters of the swordsman archetype, you know, not like a character that happens to use a sword sometimes, like Steve is not a sortie, Ganon is not a sortie, maybe Lynx are somewhat like kinda half and half sometimes, but they're not the sortie archetype, right? Out of the truest of the true sword characters, Roy was the most common answer as to who the best one was. Some people were arguing Lucina because of her consistency. We had Cloud Defenders back then because there was talk about how he was nerfed from Smash 4 and he wasn't good anymore. But we were very wrong. And then Byleth came out and we had MK Leo fans, you get it, right? It was Roy all along, but there was at least room to cope, right? Like, I could lie to myself and pretend I was playing the best sortie in the game, but now saying this gets you posted on the Bad Smash Takes Twitter account because now in the present, the answer is so easily Aegis. I could give you a rundown on how exactly Pyra Mythra's design makes them so good, but I'm guessing a lot of you probably know that already, so instead I'm just gonna go into how they outclass some popular sorties, and you should be able to pick up on why they are the best. So Roy is a character that's all about speed, he's all about power and aggression. He has his insane sweet spots at the hilt of the sword, which means he has to be up in your face if he wants to do well, which is something that can be exploited. You can camp him out, but again, he's super quick and he has amazing frame data, so if he's good at maneuvering, he'll be just fine even though he's forced to approach. And other than that, his only real weakness is recovery. It's his weakness by design, that was intentional. But it really isn't as bad as you might expect. There's a really cool video by Cypher I left in the description that's all about Roy's secretly alright recovery, go check it out. But still, it isn't his strong suit. That's Lucina's thing, we'll get to her. You also can't really zone out or play defensively, which isn't that bad because, I mean, you're Roy. Like, why would you want to do that, right? But still, I mean, I don't know, I wanted to mention that since the main reason he can't zone is because his sword is kind of small and it's kind of weak at the tip, which perfectly transitions into the fact that Pyra Mythra have all of the good stuff I just mentioned, and their swords are huge without sour spots, so that's kind of crazy, right? This is kind of straightforward, right? You use Mythra for the speed and the combos and turn into Pyra when you want the kill. They're like Roy, except kind of split into two characters, and the combos are more busted and easier, and the kill power is more ridiculous. And you can choose to take things a little slower, again, because of their sword size and their insane call-out games. You'll still be kind of weak to edge guarding, but you have pretty much everything that Roy has, plus a big sword, letting your approaches be safer if you space well. You have foresight, you have Pyra side B. It's crazy. I love Roy, but let's make up a fake person here who's new to the game and doesn't have any attachment to any character and only cares about playing the best sortie. They don't care about their design, they don't care if they vibe with the playstyle or anything. If you make them choose between these two, there's no real reason for them to pick Roy here. I mean, I would, because he's more fun and he's my boy. But again, if you're just someone who wants the better character and that's it, then yeah, it's Aegis. Most people who main Roy or any of these other characters don't main them because they think they're the best sortie, no question. attention. It's because they just enjoy playing them more and they believe in them and their potential, which is fair. I'm the same. I could never main a character I don't enjoy playing, and I'm sure most of you guys are the same. Roy being outclassed was kind of straightforward, but Cloud is interesting because he doesn't really play like Aegis. Cloud's all about the footwork, he's all about catching landings, calling out habits. Not exactly a super defensive character, but he can definitely zone people out if he wants to. He does great approaching, but also pressuring opponents to come to him thanks to Blade Beam and Limit. He has an amazing out of shield game, Limit is busted, back air is busted. Cloud's great, like these are only a few of his strengths. He has some interesting weaknesses, there's the recovery, but also his aerials can be parried a little more easily or reacted to because of their slowish startup every now and then. And I didn't know this until I started researching some stuff, but he has to DI in on combos sometimes because if he gets sent too far, he might just not make it back on stage. That's crazy. Cloud is probably the sortie that I'm talking about today that was impacted the least from Pyra Mythra. He's still considered a really good character all around. Spargo may be the only top level Cloud main right now, but he also kind of still was that before Aegis came out. So I'm not sure why we see so little of this character outside of him, because it's kind of unanimously agreed upon that Cloud is a great character, but you know, I don't know, who knows. Anyways, the reason Aegis is still a better sortie is because they're busted. It's kind of hard to compare these two because despite them both being sorties, they do play different games and they look for different things. I could see him as a little more close to Pyra in a sense, but also not entirely. I don't know, but because they're both part of the sortie archetype, I thought he'd be worth checking out. He's kind of here as a courtesy. They might all be carrying metal sticks around, but Cloud plays a different game, so he's mostly safe. On the other side of the coin, Lucina is probably the sortie that suffered the biggest fall off over time. Actually, never mind. Thanks to Marth for taking one for the team here. So yeah, Lucina is interesting here because she is kind of a mix between Pyra and Mythra. Like, I think Roy behaves a little more like Mythra and Cloud behaves a little more like Pyra. Of course, with a speed and power balance because they can't transform like Aegis. But with Lucina, it's kind of difficult to decide who she behaves more like. Lucina is like Roy, except you swap out some kill power for combo game and consistency, zoner potential, and better recovery and edge guarding, and other than that, she and Aegis have some insane similarities. Nice frame data, safe aerials, at least when spaced, good speed, pretty hair, big swords, except Lucina is just an honest character. She's great, don't get me wrong, I made this character, but the meta right now doesn't really promote straightforward gameplay. I'll get into the state of the meta once I finish talking about individual characters, but in a few words, it's basically like a lot of S tier characters have something that gives them an edge. Joker has gun, and Arsene, Diddy Kong has the banana peel, Kazuya has electric wind, god fist, Steve is a bitch, you know, stuff like that. And some people see Aegis as Lucina if she had this X factor. She has her slight cheese element, like the combo breaker up B, for example, or the fact that all of her moves are disjointed. I guess you could call that a gimmick, but again, in a game with frame 1 combo breakers, consistent combos that either do 80% or just kill you, and Min, yeah, she's too normal for this game. She should have brought her bow. I played her game. She has a bow. That would have been cool. Going back in time a little, Roy was more widely known as the best sortie in the game, but Lucina wasn't far below him, and she did have the title of the consistent sortie. She was like Roy for people who wanted to play it safe and rely more on zero bullshit gameplay. Not to call Roy a bullshit character, I love Roy, but she definitely was seen as good across the board in contrast to Roy's higher highs and lower lows. That is something she does have over Roy to this day, but when you add another character of the sortie archetype that is better consistently, yeah, of course every Lucina player is gonna have that little devil on their shoulder telling them to drop her, right? It makes sense. I've heard Lucina be called a strict downgrade of Aegis, not because they're exactly like Lucina but better, because they aren't. They actually play pretty differently, they look for different things and stuff, but because they're the new queens of consistency, which is again a title Lucina used to hold before Pyra and Mythra came out. I'm not gonna blame this fall off only on Pyra and Mythra, if at all. Remember, I'm kind of asking this video's question to myself too. I don't know the answer yet. I mean, I do now that I'm recording it, but as I wrote the script, I didn't know the answer yet, so there's other things to look into. She was kind of done dirty all around, but I'll save that for later in the video. Alright, I'm gonna use Lucina as an example for this because she kind of fits the description of a fundamentals character, a fundies character, the best example of the simple swordsman archetype, a good character entirely dependent on the user's skill and knowledge of the game. I know it sounds like I'm glazing myself because again I made this character, but don't take it from me, this is literally the most honest character in the game according to a recent shoe stats poll, so there you go. And she's a swordie, which is kind of what this video is about. You could also say this about pretty much every, quote, simple swordsman guy in the game. And like maybe Byleth, even though they came out in 2020. And Corrin is weird because they kind of went up and down. They made waves in early 2024. Even I myself made a video about how, no, we're gonna, this is Corrin, you're gonna be seeing a lot more Corrin.
And they never saw her again.
They kind of went down again. Not down to the deaths they were before. They still have some crazy representation in the top 100, but I guess they don't have a lot of people talking about them anymore. I don't know, maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I'm weird, you know, maybe I'm just wrong, but I don't see people talk about Corrin as much anymore. So yeah, moving on, Fundy's characters are inherently an early game thing. What is this? What do I mean by this? Well, let's look at the S tier on the 2025 tier list. It's all characters that you really don't want to whiff a move on. Pretty much all of them. You can lose an interaction here and take a million damage. And this extends to the A tier too. Mario has his up airs, Luigi is Luigi. Even Corrin can have some free combos. Falco will put you in an unskippable cutscene. And while there are characters with good combos all over the list, you can't tell how there's less and less of them as the tiers go down. And this can be because of a ton of reasons. Maybe characters have too many weaknesses, or the combos are too difficult or too situational, you know, things like that. Good combos don't always equal good characters. But let's get back to the main thing. Also, this tier list is wrong. Swordie should be so much higher. Sword characters thrived in the first couple years of Ultimate because for the most part, they are fighters that are relatively easy to pick up and learn. They pretty much entirely run on the player's raw skill at the game, which is great when the game has just come out and technical characters aren't as present yet. While at the start of the game, Lucina was a significantly better character than Luigi, for example, the Luigi meta had more to it. There was simply more to learn. This means that he took longer to develop, but now that Luigi players figured him out, now he's better than Lucina in most present day tier lists. It wasn't that Luigi was always better than Lucina, it's that he wasn't and now he is, right? Because now people know what to do with him, and that's kind of just the way tier lists go. People learn and rankings change, I guess. We used to think he was useless outside of the 0 to death, but no, he can just kill you whenever he wants to. He sucks. I've heard people say he's better than Kazuya even. Meanwhile, Lucina mains, I mean, we kind of figured out 80% of this character's potential by the time Pyra and Mythra came out. She's still being optimized, of course, you know, she can whip out some crazy tricks in advantage state, and her combos can be surprisingly good too, but in the end, people feel comfortable fighting against Lucina because A, for the most part, they know what they're getting, this character is pretty straightforward, and B, they know that the most damage they'll take from a true Lucina combo in neutral is like 35 to 40%, maybe 50 to 60 if they miss attack on a platform. Unless I figure something out, I'm kind of a Lucina labber myself, you know, this character's still good, I will die on this hill. And then when she's at an advantage, Lucina can still pull off some nasty edge guards and less traps and juggles. The reward from winning neutral is gonna feel great, and your advantage state may go on and on for a while, and you'll deal a ton of damage. You'll work for it and you'll get a reward. But then when you lose neutral once against anyone in the S tier, it can all come crashing down. And I'm not saying Pikachu combos are low effort, for example. Like, I'm not an elitist. I like Pikachu, he's cool, and there's plenty of cool characters in S tier. But my point is they have a lot more leeway to screw up in neutral, or they can get away with not having the best neutral, because once they eventually get in, that's all they need to even out the game, or snowball a lead over and just do their thing. Now, to be fair, just because a character has good combos doesn't mean you're gonna eat those huge combos every single time you lose in neutral. It would be pretty disingenuous of me to say that everybody will always land easy, guaranteed, consistent 80% combos every time they found an opening, unless you're Luigi or Kazuya, right? Fuck him. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that come in, like what percentage you're at, how good you are at DI, if you have a good combo breaker. Sometimes people mess up their combos. But let's simple things down and talk about like average percentage dealt after a win in neutral. It's a lot higher than it used to be a few years ago for everyone. Even Lucina or Ike, except despite having great optimized damage output just like everyone else, it's just not comparable to Mythra's insane combo game and Pyra's ridiculous call-up power. That's by design. She has extensions with side B sometimes, that's cool. But of course, an optimized version of a combo character is gonna do more damage than an optimized version of a zoner 1-2 combo character, right? Like, sure, they all get optimized, but that doesn't mean their combos are gonna be equally as good. Obviously, a combo character is gonna have better combos than a non-combo character, regardless of how optimized they are. Again, percentage dealt after a win in neutral goes up for everyone, but doesn't go up equally. The fact that Lucina isn't designed to deal a ton of damage and delete stocks like that kinda can't be ignored nowadays. That doesn't mean she's bad, it doesn't mean she's obsolete, but the fall off in tier list, it makes sense. A lot of top characters right now have either one or two ways to greatly punish people who make a mistake. One way to do it is through one move, like Luigi up at a shield, and the other way to do it is through their combo games, like Luigi's combos. Game & Watch has his combo game, Kazuya has Electric Wind, God Fist, Joker's combos are insane even without Arsene. Pikachu's combos, Snake's up tilt, Steve's combos, and Minecart. Like, it's all about getting insane, devastating punishes right now. It's what people look for in a character in 2025. Lucina, Cloud, and Corrin definitely have kill power, obviously, right? But unless you land a shield breaker or your limit timing is miraculously on point all the time, you don't really have a way to destroy stocks at low percents off very few wins in neutral like the characters I mentioned before. Roy has a ton of surprise kill power, Cloud does get some leeway through limit, and Corrin has mashy combos which are fun. But Lucina is, I mean, consistent. She has F smash, that's really good, but maybe she's consistently good in a world of consistently amazing characters. And I'll start defending Aegis in a bit, I promise, for the 4th time, I promise I don't hate this character, but what Lucina had going for her is that she's a no bullshit character with an if you play better you'll win type attitude, and she still is really consistent, but she just doesn't hit as hard as Aegis, who is just as, if not more, consistent and stronger and faster. Again, the reason I'd say Aegis is pretty much a direct upgrade of Lucina isn't because of the playstyle, it's because of the consistency. This was a big hook, a big selling point for people looking to pick Lucina up. People loved that about her back then, but Aegis is just better at that. Like, you need to change up your playstyle somewhat, you know, learn some combos, edgeguard a little less, but you're still a consistent sortie, and being consistent and being a sortie, that's already like 2/3 of Lucina's legacy in Ultimate so far, right? So what can you do, right? She's just better at everything except recovery and edgeguarding. You know, Lucina does beat her there, but I mean, other than that, that's the DLC effect, I guess. It is what it is. I don't care. I'm never gonna drop this character. All right, now we can move on from Lucina. She was kind of the best example of a character built for the early game, but like I said earlier, you could say this about a bunch of sorties. This kind of applies to them too, because it feels like Pyra Mythra, because their DLC or something is just a combination of the best attributes from each sortie, right? Before I move on, you may be thinking like, hold on, Anne, 1 second, look at Roy, Cloud, and Corrin on the tier list. And Lucina is still an A tier. What's up with that, man? You're lying to us? Well, no. And I mostly agree with those placements. They're good characters, but when I say they fell off, I'm not talking about tier list placement or how good they are, because they're always going to be good. I'm talking about representation, which seems to be more and more important as the game moves on, right? When Shiny Mark won Smash Factor 11, everybody was like, whoa, guys, Pikachu might be like better than Sonic. Like, people were saying Pikachu might be the 3rd best character in the game, and I think that's crazy. Just because Shiny Mark won Smash Factor 11, like, maybe Shiny Mark is just incredible at the game. Like, not only because a character wins a major means they're suddenly top tier, right? But I'm gonna stop myself from going on a tangent here. Let's go back to the representation. Here are Shoe Stats rankings for the top 100 players for every character as of January 2025. Like, sure, Roy may be the king of A tier because he's amazing, but let's try to see how many top level players he has. Based on what Shoe Stats told me, let's think of top players as those who are in the top 100. Obviously, you know, this game has more than 100 incredible players. This is a super talented community. We, of course, have people outside of these 100 that have been players in the top 10. It's kind of common. It's not that rare. But the thing is, once you enter the top 100, you get clout. You start to be talked about more, you'll make yourself known as the representative for your character, unless you're Steve, because they make up like half the list. But you get what I mean, right? Like, Spargo is the cloud rep, Masa and Motonabe are the Falcos, Peanut is the Mega Man, Mystery and Leon for Lucina. And you can go check out Shoe Stats character specific power rankings in his Twitter. They're great, go check them out, and they're full of talent. But unless you go out of your way to look for more talent, if you're just an average player that tunes into big tournaments on the VG Bootcamp Twitch stream sometimes, what Lucina players would you know outside of Leon and Mystery and Parmesan? Just kidding, this is Ignace. You probably heard about Ignace. He's amazing, super popular in SoCal. It's a shame we haven't seen him pop off in majors as much recently. He's pretty sexual with it. He's kind of nice with it. And then what about Corrin? There's 3 in the top 100. There's Neo, there's Shattuck, and there's LY. Roy's all about Cola, Alice, and Goblin. And these numbers don't seem bad, right? Like, in a game with 80 characters, it adds up that A tier characters have 2 to 4 top players in the top 100. Like, you know, maybe now that I look into it, maybe it's not like sorties fell off as much as I thought they did. But then when we turn our heads back to Aegis and we look at their representation, only in the top 10 we already see 4 people who play Aegis in bracket. That's Spargo, Akala, Shuton, and MK Leo. That's a lot, and those are some big names, let alone 4 people. Those are some big names that play Aegis. The thing is, if I were to just say that and end the video here, that would be super misleading on my part, and I don't want to do that, because check this out. contrary to what this video has led you to believe so far, despite Aegis being one of the most played characters in Ultimate, it turns out that the whole semi-popular sentiment of Pyra Mythra swooping in and making every sortie irrelevant might be super exaggerated. Up until now, I've been kind of theorizing about it more than anything. I've made a few points that kind of make it like an even discussion on whether or not Aegis caused sorties to fall off, but I'm about to drop some hard facts, you know, so factual information that I feel like is just gonna shut the discussion down for good. So alright, let's pick up where we left off. We have Spargo, Akala, Shuton, and MKLeo, 4 big name Aegis players in only the top 10, while Lucina is lucky to have 2 in the top 100, right? Crazy comparison, right? Well, let's look more into it, because I left out a tiny little detail 30 seconds ago that is pretty important, and that is none of these players main Pyra Mythra. So forget about the top 10. Throughout the entire top 100 players, they are always a secondary or a pocket pick. Akala is a Steve main, Spargo mains Cloud, Leo mains Joker, and Shuton, you could argue this is a co-main relationship. He uses them more than anyone else in the top 10, but he's still known as an Olimar main. So going back to the top 100 representation, if we count only players who main Aegis, no secondary, no nothing, players who use Aegis, most of the time they're in bracket, the number drops down to 0. Like, actually, there are literally no Aegis mains in the top 100 right now. I'm using Liquidpedia's 24.2 ranking, the one that was calculated at the end of last year, the one we saw Spargo pop off for a few months ago for being number 1. They show up 6 times here, but never as a main. We have 4 in the top 10, and then Snow, who mains Mario, and Carmelo, who mains Steve. Everybody plays this character, but nobody mains them. The highest ranked Aegis main is Cosmos, who doesn't show up on the 24.2 ranking, which displays the top 150 players, but he does show up at 116 in the shoe stats page that has more recent info. So let's go Cosmos, climbing the ranks, okay. So that's some crazy info, right? Like, I didn't even expect that to be the case. Like, I always think it's super interesting to see the character usage stats drop every half a year, and I never imagined that a character so high that has been in the top 10 most popular fighters since they dropped is actually that high because they're the best secondary, not because a lot of people main them. This was a crazy plot twist to me. And then we take that info and apply it into all the stuff I've covered so far. You know, when I say sword characters are an early game thing and the new meta and stuff, there's actually a bunch of sorties that in a way have more representation in terms of mains, at least in terms of mains, not usage in general, in terms of mains. Like, I'd argue there being 3 Roy mains or even 2 Lucina mains in the top 100 might be more relevant representation than 4 top players using Aegis occasionally to cover bad matchups. So that's kind of my take on the data. And then at the same time, it turns out that Corrin, Lucina, Roy, and Cloud players, their player bases are more dedicated to their characters than I thought, which is really cool. So can we really blame the usage drop on Pyra Mythra if it turns out that sortie mains are the most stubborn people that will never drop their main? Like, Leon and Mr. E have been Lucina mains forever. Cola and Roy are an insane pair, Spargo and Cloud, you know? Like, I've seen people bitch about Aegis swooping in and taking our jobs, taking the sorties jobs, right? But it seems like top level reps for these guys have not changed as much as we thought they did. Moving on, I don't doubt that outside of the top 100, there's been people dropping Lucina or dropping Roy or whatever for other characters and stuff. Of course, you know, not to act like top 100 players are the only people that matter. That's obviously not the case. But like I said earlier, if you're up here, you sure as hell have a ton of influence on the rest of the player base in terms of how other characters are perceived. For example, Lucina's placement on the tier list took a huge hit and has only been getting huger when Proto Banham retired. I hope he's doing well. And then the whole idea of Corrin being a Sonic counterpick came because of what Spargo, Neo, and Shattuck started doing and showed up at Genesis X, where there were 3 Corrins in the top 8. Byleth was an A-tier character when Leo was using them a lot more, and then as soon as he started using them a little bit less, they're back on the B tier. Like, I could go on. This stuff happens all the time. So to come to a conclusion, right? A concluding statement, you know, repeat your points and add a conclusion to end the video on my little investigation. I would say this: Pyra and Mythra are the best sortie. This means that people who are looking to pick up a sword character will likely gravitate towards them instead of the usual Lucina, Roy, Cloud triangle we had going before they released this DLC. But pretty much all of the top level representation that all of these 3 guys had beforehand has stayed more or less the same, which means that for sword characters, the slight decline in relevancy isn't because people are dropping them because they suck. It's actually a mix between the straightforward swordie archetype being kind of an early game pick because of their simplicity, and the new punish game or campy oriented meta that ends up forcing them to approach more in some cases, or they don't give them enough reward when they win neutral, or both, you know, at Lucina, right? And while it can be easy to assume that best character of the swordy archetype comes out equals people will drop their sword characters for them. That might be the case sometimes. This game is played by a lot of people, but again, it doesn't look like the most influential players are following this logic. Of course, this doesn't mean that swordies are bad and outdated. They still work, but I don't know, the meta favors cheese now, and some sword characters are lactose intolerant, right? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Play who you like. Meanwhile, the real reason we see Aegis a lot is because of how good they are as a secondary, not just because they outclass every swordie and make them irrelevant. I could make an entire ass video on what it is about them that makes them the best secondary, but it basically just goes down to their versatility. Sword characters tend to have all right matchup spreads all over. The range is always good. You can speed the game up, you can slow the game down. It makes a lot of sense. These two are insanely versatile, and as to why people don't main her and instead seem to keep her only for emergencies, I couldn't tell you. I'd love to see some theories in the comments because I'm sure she'd make a great solo main, but she certainly seems to be leaving her mark not as the best swordie, but as the best counterpick. Like, it looks like that's kind of what makes her popular, not the sword, the counterpick aspect that she has. So you could see this two ways. Either yes, Pyra Mythra do have more representation because they show up more and swordies fell off, L swordies, or swordies kind of fell off for a variety of reasons, you know, the meta and all that stuff, but at least the ones that remain are played as mains. So is Aegis really on the driver's seat of the swordy mobile car if she's only around when people are forced out of their actual mains? While other top level players like Mystery, Shattuck, and Cola will see their Lucinas, Roys, and Corins through almost every matchup? Yeah, I mean, as a diehard Lucina main, I'd rather have that than having my main be MKLeo's side piece, right? Enough of the victim mentality, my fellas. Let's stop coping. It's time to put Lucina back on the map. Let's go!